Hello and welcome to Window. We shall be talking about red meat. During an investigation of the African Center for Community and Development, I was privileged to meet a lot of butchers and other stakeholders that are linked to meat production in Cameroon. And in terms of development literature as to meat production in Africa, it is also not a very dynamic progress. There is the issue of climate change that has impacted on natural grazing land. There has been movement from occupations that were linked to pastoral nomadism to other professions, and as well as the planting of monocultures in Saharan Africa. All these issues have affected policies and also the actual numbers of red meat production in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. But then, can there be alternatives to red meat? I say there can be alternatives to red meat, especially as we know too much consumption of this protein might lead to the accumulation of cholesterol in our blood systems that sometimes are very harmful to us. This is not to say that people of less developed countries or developing countries do not need to consume red meat, or they do not need to step up the amount of red meat production in their countries. After all, they have not yet achieved food security, and there are many millions, hundreds of millions actually, living below the poverty line and who do not have access to red meat. But what we are saying is that we can curb this lack of access in Africa by visiting options that are alternatives. Alternatives to red meat are very vital to our agricultural and food security policies and to the well-being of our various subpopulations. And today we shall be discussing insects. I think there are so many edible insects. Sometimes it is the pride of major international television sets to visit some Asiatic countries to justify that they consume the strangest of animals that we will not dare. But ironically, these same animals exist in our countries in Africa. Some of these same animals are eaten there, but why they are not propagated and why they are not marketed, I think it has something to do with a geographical as well as a conceptual perception of what we have to eat. When I was growing up, I think I got to hear that maggots were eaten by some people. When I became an adult, I realized that some people who were close to us were eating maggots that were gotten from palm trees. But then, I'm an adult and I know there is a crisis in my country and in my region in terms of access to red meat. And I also know maggots are insects that can also step up protein needs in these areas. So why then are they not farmed in an industrial scale? Other insects look like termites, and others are termites themselves. During their winged reproductive process, that they fly away, they are caught up and eaten in areas like the northwest province of Cameroon. And then sometimes people who come from this region are also mocked for eating these animals. But I say, why shouldn't insects be consumed if they taste well, if they are good for our dietary preferences, if they augment our capacity to resist shocks and stresses imposed by diseases? Why can't we market our cultural heritage? Why are we fooled by unprogressive doctrines to be what we are not? We are a region that is greatly struck by issues of hunger, by issues of diseases, and we need to improve access to to proteins which are very necessary for people's resilience to these shocks and stresses imposed by diseases. So today, I think Window is trying to suggest that we should look critically on some of the insect species we have in Africa that are edible. We should also think about the possibilities of propagating these insect species and to market them so that they are readily available to subpopulations that need to consume them. It is nothing of a civilization or of importance to be regarded like you cannot consume things that other people consume in other parts of the world, judging from the fact that men are by their stations generally equal, no matter where they find themselves. So I think if it is eaten in China or in Cameroon, it can be replicated in Ghana or in Niger, and as well as in other countries that do not even have this natural species. That is why we must think about the possible linkages between societies and countries, and also the possibility of looking at our issue of not having access to protein in a holistic manner, and also judging it from the fact that sometimes it is based on our subjective analysis of needs in the continent that has affected policies or deterred the propagation of insects that were traditionally handed down to us by our ancestry. Thank you very much for tuning in on to Window, and I hope it actually brought to the platform a way of trying to design policies towards alternatives for red meat in Cameroon, in Africa, and sub-Saharan Africa. It has been Arrey Ivo.